Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the third episode of the podcast. I see a few people starting to stream in here. We'll give it a little bit of time for some more people to join in, but then we'll get right started with the subject matter of the night. Hold on, I gotta make things a little bit brighter. There we go, that's better. Hi there, Emmy. Welcome to the live stream, or welcome to the podcast, I should say. Shauna, welcome. Good to have you here. Hey there, Gary. Good to have you. So yeah, we're just going to do a little bit of a talk tonight just about alternative culture in general, about why I chose a long time ago to live this lifestyle, why I considered continuing it on into past my childhood, I guess I should say, into my adult life and on into my 30s, and why I'm happy that I made that choice, what it means to me, and why it's important to the world in general. And yeah, so hey there, Jake. Welcome to the live stream. Doing good. Hope you are doing well also. So yeah, that's what the subject matter is, as you can tell from the thumbnail. I don't actually know if the thumbnail shows up while I'm streaming, so it may just actually show a picture of me. So I'm not really 100% positive. I usually can tell a huge difference from the moment I have the coming soon screen and click onto the on air, and it actually seems like people are waiting for that image of me to pop up instead of seeing the coming soon stream or streaming soon screen and waiting on it. So I'm assuming that it probably shows a small screenshot of what's actually going on in the stream. So hey there, Amanda. Welcome. Good to have you. Jenny, thanks for joining us. I'm going to zoom in on my chat just a little bit here. All right, that's a little bit better. Hope my audio is also doing okay. Again, it's a little bit difficult to tell. Here soon I am going to upgrade the audio setup and get some headphones so that I can actually monitor my sound. Hey there, Sue. Welcome. Good to have part of our Australian audience in the stream tonight in the chat. Hey there, Todd. Welcome. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. I'm glad that we could do this for a second night in a row and do, obviously, like I said, the third episode of the podcast. Kind of, again, a topic that's near and dear to my own heart, and one of the reasons that I started the podcast in general. I don't think obviously I would be doing this at all if I didn't live this sort of life, and so yeah, I think it's important to reach out to connect other people and people on both sides of the aisle, whether or not you live this type of lifestyle or not. I think it's important to learn and to understand why people do it, and so there's no misconceptions out there. And I find a lot of people don't necessarily go out of their way to insult people. And that's not really what we're going to be talking about tonight, but I do believe that education really helps that, though. When you can finally understand or connect with somebody that lives that way, people tend to be a little bit more understanding. So, yep, email came through just fine. Yeah, I'll go ahead and get all that out to you. Hey there, Manya. Welcome to the live stream. Thanks for joining us. All right, well, I think we'll probably just go ahead and get on into it here. Let me pull up my tablet here. I've got everything written down. I tend to write notes for myself when I do the podcast just so that I can stay on track and not forget anything. Once we get started and get going and all the comments are coming in and questions are coming in, it can be a little bit difficult to remember every single thing, so I try to keep it all written down on here, and that way we keep things going smooth and, not have too many hang-ups at the very least. But again, as always, feel free to interject. Feel free to talk about your own feelings or ask any, whatever questions you want to ask, and we'll pause and go over that. And so, hey, Todd. Oh, yeah, I already said hi, but yeah. How do I find alternative culture? Anything can be alternative culture. It's just typically defined as something that not as many people as what the majority of people, I'm stumbling over my words, something that less people live, but not necessarily any one thing. Rock and roll culture can be considered alternative culture. There's lots of, traveling in general can be considered an alternative culture. There's skate culture, there's surf culture, there's, all kinds of things, anything that people do not to just have a hobby, but to define their life, motorcycles, big alternative culture, it's not just, a scene or a hobby. It's considered in a lot of ways a way of life, and people surround themselves with other people that live that sort of life and live a life that's centric to those values. So anything can be really a culture. Body modification is a lot of times a culture, yeah, so I hope that explains that. I mean, we're just going to kind of talk in generalities and some surrounding some of the choices that I've made in my life. And I feel like that can also be applied to, the majority of other alternative culture out there. But we can also get into that and discuss that a little bit. However, I will be making the subject of some of the upcoming episodes surrounding these different types of alternative culture. So we will do a little bit more of a deep dive on that in the future too. So, hey there, Matthew. Welcome to the live stream. Yeah, good to have you all. Again, thank you for joining me tonight. I'm excited to be back and doing the podcast again, especially. Obviously, as I've said before, it's something I've really been wanting to try for a while and really want to continue to do it on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis, and then hopefully even expand it over to some other platforms as well. And so, yeah, it's good to be back and good to be, again, streaming for a second day in a row here. It's nice to be on a regular schedule again, especially after some of the issues that we've been having across the channels and across YouTube in general. So, and again, just glad I can actually do this without having to risk any of your guys' individual accounts. Again, if you didn't join us for last night's stream, I was talking about the Markiplier video where he discussed the accounts getting banned for sending too many comments. Hey there, Big Steve. Good to have you. As always, check out Big Steve's channel. We worked together when we were, when I was in California. Steve obviously lives in California. And so it was great to be able to go out there and get together with him and get some really cool history from the Hayward area, which is a city in the Bay Area of California. So, yeah. And whenever I do end up making it back out there, I'm sure we'll go out on some more adventures and see some more things and get to hear some of Steve's epic knowledge of the history of that area. So, And if you haven't seen the episodes that we did together, make sure you check those out. They're some of the most popular videos on my channel to this date, and it was a really, really fun experience. And Steve obviously does his own live streams as well. So yeah, let's get into it. First thing I wanted to touch on, why you're living this lifestyle is, personal choice. Do what you want to do. I think it's kind of a weird thing in society where we look down on people for making a personal choice, and it seems strange that there's nothing wrong with being treated equally, and obviously I'm a strong proponent of that. For anybody who's born anyway and chooses to live that way, but at the same time, I also want to be a supporter of people who actually choose to do something as well. And I think there's a lot of negative connotations revolving around people that just choose to do something because they like to do it. And it's a lot easier, I think, in some aspects of the conversation to look down on people that just make a choice and aren't forced to do something for a certain reason. Absolutely, bro. Yeah, can't wait to get back there. And great area too. I really love the Bay. It was a lot of fun. Hey Laura, good to have you here. But yeah, I think that's kind of silly as a society that's where we end up drawing the line, is at personal choice. If you live with something, or live with a disability, or you're just born different from everybody else, it's very important in our society, especially nowadays. I know it's not completely, we're not 100% of the way there, but we see different movements out there to treat people equally because they're not necessarily born like the rest of us, and I think that's great. But I think we should extend that to include people who, again, live alternative types of lifestyles as a personal choice, as something that they love to do. And so, oops, there we go. And so, yeah, I think when you're out there and you just see somebody who looks a little bit different because they've chosen to be a little bit different, because they like to be a little bit different, and, we can't just look on those people with judgmental eyes because they don't look like the rest of us or dress like the rest of us. They don't listen to the same music as the rest of us, or whatnot. And also, to touch on another thing that I thought was kind of silly, is how a lot of times people will openly make fun of people who dress differently or have strange colored hair like I do, and then at the same time they'll hop back in their car, turn the radio on, and listen to music created by those types of people. If you listen to rock and roll, if you listen to rap, if you listen to any of those forms of music, a lot of times if you look at the pictures of these people creating these music, they look a lot like me. They have crazy fashion, they have tattoos, they have piercings, and some of them don't, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But at the same time, I think it's a little bit silly that people will be so judgmental in public, in person, but then at the same time, they really do idolize these people in their own lives. Hey there, Ian, welcome. Good to have you. What about drug addicts? Addiction is not a alternative lifestyle, but I think there is some drug culture. I think we're starting to redefine what that means these days, the difference between culture and addiction, and also the safety of different substances and what they can do. Obviously, opioid abuse is something that has really ravaged the nation and hurt a lot of people, and I wouldn't consider that to be a culture, although there is some culture surrounding it. But it just really depends on what you define as a drug and how it's used, and if it's used responsibly or if it's used irresponsibly. But I mean, there can be a certain culture surrounding it, But yeah, it's a touchy subject, but at the same time, it's it's all about learning. It's all about getting a full grasp of the knowledge. You know, again, there's a difference between being addicted to opioids or being or living in a state, say like California, like where Steve lives, where marijuana is legal. It's a huge difference, and like I said, at the same time, there is culture surrounding it. It is somewhat an alternative culture, but I wouldn't link that alternative culture to the addiction and abuse. So, moving forward, though, God, it always tries to edit the document every time I tap the screen. This is going to get kind of irritating. I'm going to have to put this down. Kind of going along with the personal choice, I just like what I like, and people like what they like, then there's nothing wrong with that. And I like it despite the controversy. There was kind of a strong movement in the 90s, especially with punk rock style, to sort of do stuff particularly to piss people off, to make people sort of judge you. And I think it was not necessarily immature, but at the same time, it was a different way of looking at things. And, I was always kind of one of those people, I didn't necessarily hate it, that it's funny sometimes, people get all worked up over something, and it's just the way you look. It's not really affecting them in any way, but at the same time, they choose to get angry about it, and it is somewhat funny, but at the same time, I kind of abhor controversy in a lot of ways. I try to avoid it in a lot of ways. And so the fact that I do dress like this and live this sort of lifestyle, it sort of attracts that type of controversy, that type of judgment. And so I sort of live it despite that, So, I think it's really easy to think that people are just doing stuff for attention. And like for me personally, that type of attention doesn't make me comfortable. So the fact that I live it anyway is kind of a testament to the fact that I truly do enjoy, this style, this lifestyle, and this look. And, like I said in previous episodes of the podcast, you get crazy comments about your hair color or the way you dress. I get probably one of the number one negative comments that I get on the YouTube channel is telling me to stop looking the way I look. And despite that, I still enjoy it enough to continue, and don't see any end in sight ever. And I intend to, like I said, continue on with this for the rest of my life. And yeah, and a lot of people out there are the same way. Yeah, like Matthew here, it's not always comfortable, but we do it because we love to do it, and we do it because, it's our own personal choice, and we're not going to change because someone else has a negative opinion of it, because in the end of the day, it's not hurting anybody. And if it's making you angry for some reason when you see somebody like that, or you think that they need to grow up, then it's probably something inside yourself that you need to change. If you find that you're turned off so much by that you can't even look at somebody without having those thoughts, I think that's showing some signs of a real problem, in yourself, that you are being judgmental of people just because of the way that they look or the way that they live. And that's just not okay, especially, again, when people aren't hurting anybody, and music culture obviously doesn't hurt anybody. In fact, helps a lot of people out there. And kind of brings me to the next point very well, which is that, art and music have defined my life from the very beginning anyway. It's one of the first things that I did professionally, in the sense of taking something that could have been just a hobby and then working on it and working on it and working on it until I got really good at it. I've been doing music since as far back as I can remember, well before I was 10 years old. I put a lot of time and effort into being good at it, and being good at the instruments that I played, being good at singing, all kinds of things like that. And then, of course, my artwork with my photography, and then that ended up sort of melding together when I worked in rock and roll photography for a while, and was able to actually go in there and photograph a lot of my favorite musicians and be right there front and center at the either on the stage or right in front of the stage, actually doing artwork surrounded by musicians, for people who liked that lifestyle and that type of music. And it was a really interesting way that it all got brought together. And so a lot of my life has been surrounded by that to begin with, so it makes sense to live a lifestyle like that. Well, Laura, maybe you don't live in the Midwest. They can be a little bit judgmental around here. I've gotten some of the craziest comments. I think one of the craziest I ever got was walking into a restaurant and then having some sort of older, not to judge them at all, but some older farmer kind of looked over at the table and said, "Oh, I guess tonight we get dinner and a show." And I was like, how immature that somebody your age would even think to say something like that. Like, if anybody needs to grow up, it's the older farmer that thinks that I'm somehow entertainment, Just look at me and chuckle with his friends. It's kind of ridiculous to even think that somebody who probably maintains that, they should be respected merely for their age alone would say something so disrespectful and immature. And so, excuse me, I gotta take a drink real quick. But also, I did want to interject real quick. I don't want people to think that this is sort of like a chance for me to like whine about things or talk about how I've been hurt in the past and all that. I don't put a lot of weight into these comments that people make. I think it's kind of ridiculous, but at the same time, it doesn't really hurt me or deter me at all. I don't generally like negative interactions, but at the same time, I don't go home at night and really think about it too much, but at the same time, I want to use it as a teaching moment for people out there that don't live the lifestyle that, they might think twice before they say something and hurt somebody. And, there's a lot of people out there who do get hurt, and a lot of kids in school that do get bullied, and to sort of not really call anybody out because I'm not going to say any names, but I was watching, this YouTuber, a couple of famous YouTubers that were making a video, and they were sort of doing like a punk rock sort of, not makeover really, I guess you could call it that. They were just dressing up in punk rock style, which I don't think is wrong at all. Hey Pam, welcome to the live stream. Good to have you here. But I was watching the video, and one YouTuber surprised the other YouTuber and said, so what we're going to do is dress up in punk rock style. And in the other YouTuber's immediate reaction, which was a very honest reaction for him, he said, "Ew, I've never understood why people do that." And the other YouTuber, being slightly confused by the reaction, said, kind of explained it in not necessarily the best way, but in the best way that he knew how at the time. He said, some people in high school don't have as many friends, and so they look for other people to connect with, and sometimes they get into that type of group and enjoy that type of style and dress that way. And his reaction was, well, I had fun in high school. And I thought and again, I don't want to judge either of them because they're both pretty talented people, but it's like for them to have that reaction, that it was something that was gross and not understandable, and again, the thought that it's only a high school thing or something that you have to be into when you're young and that you can't be into when you're older, I think that's sort of a little bit off-putting too, that people wouldn't realize that, again, if you look at your favorite music artist, they're probably not growing up and getting into their late 20s, early 30s and deciding to wear, a collared shirt and tie and khaki pants. And not that there's anything wrong with that either, but, again, they're not doing that normal growing up thing, but yeah, they're still responsible, successful people. And it's a little strange to think that it has to originate when you're young or has to originate at any one point in your life, Have I thought of living in another city? No, not really. I mean, for other reasons, for sure, but I would never move just to get away from ignorance, because I don't think that you're ever going to move anywhere where that's completely 100% gone anyway. You could be in the most accepting city in the world, and there's still going to be people there that are just going to be judgmental. So, it is what it is. I'm not really worried about it. Again, just more of a teaching moment to say, they're the ones that need to change, not me, And yeah, to kind of move forward and not really be as self-centric in this whole conversation, tattoos, music, artwork are pretty much the oldest culture in the world, and in a lot of ways that kind of informed my decision to live in this way, because it honors, I think, human culture in general. Some of the first things we did when we learned art was put it on our own bodies, and some of the first things we created in the world to express ourselves was music. And so it really is a testament to our own history and to the great things that we have accomplished over the thousands and thousands of years that we've been developing culture. And it's always been a way that we've communicated with each other, that we express our own feelings, our own emotions, and I think it's a beautiful thing. And again, if you look across the world in places that haven't forgotten that, you'll still see that a lot of those cultures are still very strong to this day, and especially tattoo culture. You find a lot of places in the world where that's still incredibly strong, and it's considered, an honor to get to that point in your life and be able to get certain types of tattoos, facial tattoos, different patterns on different parts of your body, and it's actually considered almost a coming of age thing, and I think that's an interesting thought. I don't necessarily think that people should be forced to get anything at certain ages, but at the same time, the thought that it's an honored tradition and not thought of as something that only criminals and evil people do is kind of interesting, and I think that's a really healthy way to look at it. And in a lot of ways, the culture, to keep moving forward, I guess, is very ahead of the curve. You see a lot of these equality movements that are going on these days, and a lot of those movements in some ways started in alternative culture, and especially in music culture. Rock and roll culture has sort of been very embracing of different types of lifestyles and different communities out there, and have been on the forefront of these people's fights for equality. Things like the LGBT movement had a lot of roots in punk culture and rock and roll culture. They had a lot of their own music and a lot of their own bands that promoted that culture, and were very much embraced by the community. And so I think it's kind of interesting that these alternative cultures are a lot of times, again, on the forefront of freedom and equality worldwide. And even today, in different areas of the world where you see a lot of bad things happening, a lot of times in those areas there's a very, very strong music scene, a very strong rock scene, and a lot of times they're, again, at the forefront of leading their nation and their culture forward in these fights for freedom and equality. And I think that's, really hopeful, and it's one of the reasons that I've always loved it so much, is because if you ever feel left out in any way, you can really turn to those people and that community for help and for reassurance and personal support. And I think it's really cool that we've built that community over the years that is willing to say, if the rest of the world doesn't accept you, we're here. We're open-armed and waiting for you to come in, and we'll help you to not only feel accepted, but we'll help you to fight for what you deserve. And I think it's really important for the world to have that community, to have those alternative communities that are there on the forefront, and for people to know that it exists. Hey Jade, welcome to the live stream. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Yeah, I wanted to wear something that I don't just wear out to go exploring. In my daily life, I obviously don't wear camo 24/7, although I do wear it in my daily life as well. But at the same time, I have a lot of different types of clothes, but for 539, a lot of times I do try to keep it sort of, I don't really know what you would call it, but I guess just exploring type of clothes that are good for going out there, getting dirty, and, it doesn't necessarily define my whole style, so I wanted to kind of wear something that wasn't something I would normally wear for the 539 Productions videos, so I appreciate that. And to sort of go on a negative note, I think it's kind of interesting that no matter what side of music you really go into, whether it's, again, punk rock, whether it's metal, just traditional rock and roll, R&B, rap, whatever it is, there's a lot of acceptance in those fields. But I think it's kind of funny, but that the one place that we really haven't learned a lot, and I think we are growing as a community, but the one place that we still have room to grow, I feel like, is when it comes to accepting each other. There's a lot of conflict between, like metal fans and punk fans and rap fans, where it's sort of this internal struggle of whose music is, hardcore enough and whose music is the best. And I think it's kind of, again, a silly argument that we'd be so accepting to everybody else except for ourselves, and sort of make it this weird contest that we're all having. And so in every culture, in every community, there's always going to be areas to grow, and that's definitely one area that the rock and roll and music communities and alternative communities in general can really grow, is to be more accepting of the other communities within and even without, to show homage to other alternative cultures and to be accepting of the people that live those lifestyles as well, is something where we could learn too. So, who's my favorite band? I guess over the years it's always been Green Day. I like a lot of different music though, a lot of smaller bands, a lot of bands that now are not together anymore. Like Harvey Danger, I think, was a really great band that's no longer together, unless they recently got back. Never heard any news that they were back together. I don't think that'll ever happen, but really cool band. There's some really interesting thrash punk bands, like Be Your Own Pet was a really cool band. But I try not to keep too many favorites. I just try to broaden my perspective as much as I can, and listen to as many different types of bands, and especially, like I said, the underground music. I think that's a really interesting scene. The people that don't necessarily get radio play, that maybe in their lifetime only have one or two songs that ever make it on the radio, if at all. And I think it's an interesting deep dive if you go into those areas, and you find a lot of people who are equally as good as what's being played on the radio, and it just might not be as popular because of the type of instruments they're playing, the style that they're playing, whatever it might be. But a lot of talented people out there. So sort of the same thing with everything. I don't really have, or try not to have, too many favorites. When it comes to traveling, I like to go places that I haven't been before. I like to do things that I haven't done before, and it's very much the same with music. And not to, again, obviously, Green Day's always been one of my favorite bands, and they're on the radio all the time, a very popular mainstream band, and so not to say there's anything wrong with that. I even listen occasionally to pop music, and I think that there's a lot of talented people in that field as well. There is an alternative pop culture, and especially in bigger cities like in New York, and I think it's really interesting. Like, if you're ever wondering, what kind of sprung the whole Lady Gaga movement and her interesting style and culture, is because she was in the underground alternative pop scene before she became a huge mainstream pop star. And so that really does exist, and there's a lot of really talented people in that. Oh, for the 539, yeah. I wear a lot of layers and a lot of things tucked into other things so that I don't have to worry as much about the bugs and the ticks and things like that. It's a little bit different from my average everyday style. Absolutely, yeah. I love music from other countries. I listen to. There's some cool sitar music that I listen to. One of the artists that I've listened to is Ravi Shankar, I believe it is. Shankar? I can't remember the exact pronunciation and spelling of it, but a very popular sitar player from India, and some really interesting music. Am I looking forward to the winter months? I wouldn't say, probably not. I mean, it's getting harder and harder around here to find locations that are interesting to do in the winter. I do like doing a lot of the winter hiking and things like that, to like the different like frozen waterfalls and frozen rivers and things like that. But it's getting kind of harder, and it's not as popular on the channel, so it does make it a little bit more difficult. But if I could get to further away places and do some different things, then it might be okay. I don't really know a lot about Lady Gaga in general. I just know that she came up in the underground alt pop scene. So I don't really know any details about anything that she did to get famous. But I mean, in terms of, I'm more just talking in terms of the scene in general. But in terms of a musician and a singer and a songwriter, she is very talented and plays. She plays piano very well, so I think that's something to be said at the very least. But obviously, no one's perfect. Everybody has. Excuse me. I need to get a better place for that. I actually want to get a sort of an articulating stand for the tablet that works kind of like the microphone, but I have not ordered it yet. That'll make it a little bit easier to work with here in the future. But I mean, everybody makes mistakes, and it's really easy to get caught up in becoming famous and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and that exponential growth. And so, I try not to judge, but at the same time, I really don't know. Yeah, I don't know that I've ever that I know of. I don't know of any alternative bands from Australia, but I've always been interested in checking out new things, like I've said, and I would be interested one of these times to look into it and see. I'm sure that there's probably some bands on the American scene that I just don't know are from Australia. I know there's a few South African bands that also are very popular here in America, and a lot of people don't realize that they're actually from South Africa. So I'm assuming in the same way, there's probably some Australian bands that are running around there. So it's kind of hard to tell sometimes when people are singing that they have an accent. So, well, not an accent, but obviously to Australians we would have an accent. But it's a little bit difficult to tell when somebody's singing where they're from. From how they talk, and obviously everybody has a different degree of talking in ways, and within, I guess, you could argue that there's an American accent. I would definitely agree with that. And so, again, though, it can be hard to tell. So, yeah, I'm sure that I've probably heard a few and just don't know. But yeah, a lot of talented people coming out of Australia, a lot of talented actors and different artists that come from there. And so, I would assume that it would be a really cool scene as well. But, yeah, I'll have to actually look into it one of these days. Silver chairs from Sydney. Yeah, I did not know. I'm hoping the stream quality is actually doing all right. Again, YouTube's kind of complaining again about my settings, even though they're set up the correct way. I don't know why it's trying to give me issues with it. It's kind of disconcerting a little bit, but hopefully it's actually going through all right for all of you guys. How long have we been going? Looks like about 45 minutes now. This might be a little bit short of a stream tonight. I don't really have a lot else to talk about. But, I mean, I guess to sort of sum up the conversation on alternative culture and living alternative culture, a lot of times it's just fun. And I think that maybe that's one of the biggest misunderstandings is I think there's this tendency to look down on people who want to have a fun life and want to enjoy their life. And I think it stems from, times when we didn't necessarily have a choice, hundreds of years ago. We didn't really have as much of a choice on how we could lead our life. The different career choices that we have now didn't exist, and so a lot of it was just about survival. And so I think that it unfortunately has bled through to the modern age, and we still sort of, as a society, as a world society, as a U.S. society, and, everywhere, sort of have this disdain for people who do something because it's fun, because it's what they like, what they love, and this idea of, going out there and looking for even a career that you like to do is sort of looked down on in a lot of ways. And a lot of people sort of just think, you grow up, you get a job, you work your 40 hours a week, and, you retire, and in your spare time, that's when you can have fun. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, and while there's a lot of great people out there to do physical labor, to do manual labor, and lead amazing lives, and obviously I would never judge them for doing that, for us to sort of think that that's the only way to go and the only route, that you don't have to love your job, you just have to be there, make your money, and clock in, clock out, and survive. I think it's unfortunate to not explore the possibilities, because not everybody is the same person, not everybody has the same desires, not everybody seeks to have a job that's fulfilling them as a person. They get their fulfillment outside of work, and again, that's great, but at the same time, there's a lot of people out there that can't, and I'm definitely one of those people. I don't know that I would have the ability to live that way. And in fact, I've had numerous times where I couldn't. I've like I said in last night's stream, I've come to the point, mentally where I just couldn't anymore. It's just like it wasn't me quitting. It was just I came to the point where I just couldn't walk through the door anymore. It's like, I remember pulling up to a place and waiting to get out of the car, and it was just like, no, I think I'm just done here. I just can't do this anymore. And I backed out of the parking space and drove back home and never went back. And probably one of the best choices that I ever made. And I just didn't have the ability to continue, and that was when I started realizing that I'm going to have to look for something different. I'm going to have to change my life completely, because there's no way that I can just lead this normal life anymore. And so that was one of the moments that I started defining this plan that I've put into motion now, and led myself into this whole social media, not necessarily social media, but this creative lifestyle where I'm creating content for people to view, and again, I've been very satisfied with it, despite the fact that I know that at least currently I can make more money going back, but the money is just not worth the time for me, because at the end of the day, I know I wouldn't be happy, and I know I would just run into another brick wall. No, I wouldn't say I was profiled by those cops. I don't think that number one, I don't know 100% if there was cameras. They had questioned everybody. They were stopping everybody in the park. And so there was some indication that there really was some sort of camera, but at the end of the day, they probably didn't know 100%. But at that point in time, it was just not worth it to try and hide it. And so I went along with it and took the fine. But at the same time, I don't think at that moment I was profiled. I do think a lot of times when you see in the graveyard videos, people continue to go around and they'll stop behind me and roll their windows down and just sit there and stare at you or film you with their phone. And I think that that's somewhat profiling. But I don't think that the cops at Helltown actually had enough information to profile. I don't think that they had, at the very least, a clear enough image to really see what I looked like. So they were a little bit confused themselves what was going on. And off camera, they were pretty, at least a few of them were pretty adamant about, they didn't go there because they wanted to go there. They went there because they were ordered to go there. So if there was any profiling that was being done, it was whoever was on the other end of the camera watching, and then they got sent out. So they were just the responders. But otherwise, they were really nice. And again, I've mentioned on a few well, maybe not a few, but I've mentioned on one live stream. I don't remember when it was, but after the camera stopped and we were all getting ready to leave, so the cops were already pulling off, one of the cars stopped, and one of the cops actually hopped out of the car and came back and knocked on the window, and he said, I really don't want this to ruin what you're doing here, and I understand what you're trying to accomplish, and I think it's actually pretty cool, and I hope that, what happened here tonight does not negatively affect what you're trying to do in the future. And he said, please feel free to post that video, and he said, I really hope that you post it, and I'll be watching for it, because I would really like to see what you create. So they were actually pretty nice people, and like I said, kind of inadvertently became fans. So I don't think that time that they were profiling me. Yeah, I've noticed obviously, as well. And I know a lot of people don't take me seriously. I've even gotten comments as recently as a few days ago, people telling me that I need to seek help because I'm becoming way too paranoid. And it's like, if you really truly watch the videos, then you'll see that these people are parking right behind me. They're rolling their windows down. You know, I had somebody on a live stream. I think I removed the live stream just because it was at the time that the live streams were really negatively affecting channels if they remained up. And I did a live stream at a graveyard. I can't remember exactly where it was, but during the live stream, this same van would circle around and roll their window down, and they would go they would go one road over, or one lane over in the cemetery, and they would stay parallel to me the entire time. And whenever I would go directly towards them, they would immediately turn and go to the nearest exit and leave, and then drive around a few streets and come in another entrance and then continue to do the same thing again. And I always think to myself, if you really think I'm paranoid, then you really haven't watched enough. And I'm not paranoid in the sense of being afraid of these people. You know, I don't really care. But at the same time, it's not paranoia to just observe what's going on. And again, like I said, I'm not afraid. I'm just sort of narrating for the camera exactly what happens. And there is a really unfortunate pattern where people tend to think that they're going to take security measures into their own hands because they don't feel that the people that run these places are doing it adequately enough, and so they will hop in their own car and essentially stalk people around these places. And sometimes they're doing it with the best intentions. They're just doing the wrong thing to the wrong people. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that it's okay. Thank you, Laura. Yeah, I agree with that. You know, you just got to do what you do, be who you are. And, you know, again, some of what I say is for other people, again, for people who live outside of this lifestyle, who live a quote-unquote normal lifestyle, to be able to get an internal glimpse. And then some of it's for people who live this lifestyle, who do take it to heart. You know, it's different for everybody, and some people can't handle that judgment, and bad things do happen, and that's unfortunate. And I really, if I can help those people, you know, and do something for them, you know, the people who can't mentally handle all the beratement and insults and things like that, then I feel like that I've done a service for those people. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of the weird misconception. Like, I had somebody say the other day that basically told me that cars don't get broken into. When I mentioned when I was at a nature preserve, and I was going really deep into the nature preserve, and I passed by this person of kind of questionable intentions, and made mention of it on the film, and somebody wrote in the comments that, you know, he's not going to break into your car, man. He doesn't want to steal your pants, is what they said. And I thought, you know, how silly to think that cars get broken into every day in all kinds of different places, and to just act like it doesn't happen is kind of way more naive than me being paranoid. And I thought that was just so strange that somebody would literally claim that crime never happens, cars don't get broken into. You know, people, you know, even the following, you know, it's like to assume that no one ever gets followed ever, that no one ever again takes that vigilante security mindset and follows people around. It's like, that's a really naive place to come from, to think that stuff like that never happens. And it makes me think that, it's like you must live such a sheltered life to think that I'm paranoid and that things like that don't happen. So it's kind of strange to me when people make those comments and sort of try to insult me. And some of them, it's a real backhanded way. They'll start out with I really enjoy the videos, but if you could just stop saying people are following you because it's getting irritating and no one likes it. And it's like, first off, you don't speak for the crowd. Each individual person isn't a representative of the whole, community that we've built here. And then secondly, again, apparently you've never watched local news because that's all they talk about. So maybe turn on the local news, learn something, and realize that things do happen and people do some strange things. Yeah, it just depends on the area. Sometimes you can kind of tell. I find not necessarily the really rural areas are as bad, but sometimes the smaller towns where there isn't necessarily a heavy police force, people sort of, not everybody obviously, I judge people as individuals and not as groups, and so I don't want to blanket judge anybody or put that umbrella over any one town, but I find that in areas where they may only have one or two police officers, there is a bigger tendency for people to make that choice to become personalized security forces and sort of patrol these places on their own. So, but when I'm out in the country, really deep in the country, miles away from even the small towns, a lot of times I find that no one really messes with me or no one really comes by. If anything at all, somebody might slow down as they drive by, look to see what you're doing, and as soon as they see a camera, they just keep moving because they don't care. They're probably busy. A lot of them are working or own farms, and so they sort of just, they're busy. They don't have time to mess with it. As long as you don't look like you're, kicking over stones or doing anything stupid, then they're just going to keep moving. And so I find, again, it's a lot of times the smaller towns, that tend to be more, I wouldn't want to say dangerous, because, again, they've never really gotten out of the car and tried to assault me or tried to confront me in any way or really even try to kick me out of these places. But at the same time, they do sort of try to intimidate you, as you've seen in some of the videos where they just will ridiculously slowly just circle the place and then stop in the middle of the street, not the streets and the graveyards, but literally the main streets. I've had people stop and roll down their windows and just sit there and stare at you. And it's like, there's no other reason, if you park in a graveyard, you could be reading a book, you could be listening to music, you could be enjoying, the nature and scenery. A lot of these places are quite beautiful places and have a lot of really great views, and so people do take advantage of that a lot and go in these places and they'll park and they'll read, and they're not always there to intimidate you, but sometimes they're just there for similar reasons. And so it's pretty easy to tell the difference when somebody will show up wherever you are and then drive in these really bizarre ways, as opposed to somebody just pulled in, parked, pulled out a book, and started reading. So I think it's interesting that people are kind of, some people are sort of judgmental and say that I'm just kind of being crazy and being, again, paranoid about it. And it's like, well, there's a real clear difference, Yeah, I don't really carry anything myself. I don't necessarily think it would be a bad decision. I've thought about doing pepper spray or having a taser or something like that. I don't really have a desire to carry anything more than that around. However, I do have things with me at all times that I can protect myself with. A lot of you have seen some of the nighttime episodes and some of the darker episodes where I've gone into the mines or into abandoned places that didn't necessarily have adequate lighting, and so I had my big flashlight on me, which is made out of aircraft grade aluminum, and in a bad situation it would be quite the useful tool to protect myself if I was being attacked. And so I do have things available that I could use in the event of an emergency, but again, to this day anyway, I have not had anybody take that final step to actually get out and try to physically remove me from the place, But you could definitely tell that a lot of people are assuming, which again I think is kind of ridiculous because, to the people watching the episodes, it's not quite as in your face as if you would see me when I was actually there if you were in the same place as I am. But I'm carrying a fairly big camera rig around, especially with the newer camera having the giant microphone on top and a more protruding lens, and with the tripod attached and everything. It's very clear that I'm there taking photos, and it would be very odd for somebody to have a clearly expensive camera rig and then be using that as cover to break into places. That seems a little bit unusual to me, and so it kind of makes me wonder again about the judgment of some of these people who come into these places and will follow you around despite the fact that again, on the other side of things, it's very clear that I'm filming. It's very clear that I'm taking photos. And so that I can't really understand. But yeah, I have enough equipment with me that in the event of an emergency, I could definitely protect myself. But if any of the sort of backward-minded thoughts about people with tattoos are ever a good thing, it does seem to work out for the best in terms of so far people seem to be way too scared to actually get out and say anything to me once they see me up close. So I guess it's worked as a deterrent for people who maybe don't want to mess with the guy that's full of piercings and tattoos. So I guess it's worked out in some ways, but at the same time, I don't appreciate the profiling or the judgment when it comes to that. But yeah, I mean, you run into a lot of people in a lot of different places, and the more people that you interact with, the more likely it is that you're gonna run into situations like that. And I think that's the real misconception is, a lot of the people who are judgmental on the channel haven't visited, 200, 300 plus locations and don't have the experience necessary to judge the situation. And so they sort of leave these brash comments that they really haven't thought over. And I've even had people come back and apologize. I had a person leave a comment literally saying, dude, you're really paranoid and you really need to stop all this. And then they watched 5 more videos and they said, I'm really sorry. I went back and watched more of the videos and you're not paranoid at all. These people are really actually doing this. And so I think it's just one of those things where they don't realize how much experience I've actually had traveling and how many different places I have been. And, not only do I have experience with more people, but I've also gained enough wisdom to know when someone else is acting a little bit fishy. I feel like I kind of do too. I don't know. When I talk on the videos and on the streams, obviously people see that I'm a nice person and pretty easygoing, but um, I have had a lot of people approach me and ask me if something's wrong or what I'm mad about, or and it's like, I'm not really mad. I just don't sit around and smile when I'm not doing or saying anything. So, normally I'm a fairly quiet person. I'm not as talkative in real life as I am maybe on the videos, and so it can be somewhat confusing to people. But I mean, I think that's another thing, when it comes to not necessarily culture, but people have a weird tendency to judge quiet people, I think, as being sad or angry or maybe violent, and I think that's kind of weird. Oh yeah. YouTube and social media in general is, I think that's kind of the problem that we see, is everybody thinks that they know everything, and they're willing to tell you that you're wrong even when you're not. I think that's kind of silly. I remember somebody's tried to lecture me about history, about how I was wrong about one of the war memorials because they didn't keep track of where soldiers fell in battle that long ago, and I thought to myself, that's the most inaccurate thing I've ever heard. I've known people situations where they've kept track of that for years and years because they couldn't get back to the location to actually put up memorials, and so they literally waited 4 years and then went back to the exact location so that they could put the memorials up. So it's kind of silly to even think that that person really took the time to write the comment that, this is impossible because people just didn't do that back then. And it's like, I don't think people really, the people that do it, I don't think, again, actually study any history or really know much at all. They just, I think it's sort of that false logic. They think, oh, something 100 plus years ago, they must have been so much less advanced than what we are. And really, technology and computers and things aside, a lot of things haven't changed much in the last few hundred years. If you were to go to like London in the 1700s, you wouldn't notice much difference. Obviously there's some more modern skyscrapers and things like that now, but generally, people have lived in buildings or lived in houses that look fairly similar for the last few hundred years. People have had pretty similar construction styles. You see a lot of these, like even like the churches and things, the Gothic style churches that are like 600-700 years old, and it's like, if somebody didn't tell you that was a 700-year-old structure, you would never know. It could have been built 5 years ago and they would have built it the same way. And so it's kind of strange that people just go out of their way to say things that they think are expert comments, and they haven't even studied the subject at all, and it's really easy to tell. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's something to, if you don't have experience, then don't think you're an expert. And then people will really heavily judge based on things that didn't really occur in your lifetime. Like, I remember talking about some things on a building that I had never seen before, and that was because that construction style literally hadn't been around in my lifetime. It's not something that people do anymore. And so when I made the comment, I got a few comments in the comment section where people are like, well, how stupid do you have to be to not know what this is? And it's like, I don't have to be stupid at all. I just have to be younger than, the 1940s when this was something that was popular to do, back when, um, I wasn't around and I didn't know about it, and I learned about it by seeing it. And so, when these people come and they're like, obviously you should know this, and it's like, obviously I'm not an expert in all things and not a college graduate in architecture, so why would I know such things? And it's kind of interesting what people will judge you on. But yeah, I get a lot of strange, I shouldn't say a lot, again, as I've always said, it's probably like 90-95% positive comments on the channel, but whenever it is negative comments, they're always very bizarre and almost never make much sense at all. And then a lot of people will make comments sort of blindly about old videos, which I think is kind of hilarious. A lot of people will tell me to get rid of my GoPro, and it's like, obviously you have not watched a single new video of mine if you're telling me to get rid of my GoPro, because I haven't even used a GoPro on a single episode in like a year and a half, 2 years. And for you to literally tell me to get rid of my camera, not realizing that I've replaced it 2 times now, is kind of crazy to me too. It's like they'll watch just one video and maybe even just one small segment, and then they'll make this really judgmental comment about it, and it's like, you clearly have not watched anything else on my channel, or you would realize that I already did replace it, But yeah, again, it's the nature of social media in general. People just, they don't feel the need to actually look into anything. It's just a sort of really snap reaction, I guess you'd call it. They just, think it and then type it and then think about what they actually said later on. And, maybe they feel stupid later, but, it's like, clearly that didn't stop anything. But yeah, and I think, well, hold on. There we go. It sort of plays really well into what we're talking about tonight, though, too. I think a lot of times that's the same thing, when I'm out in public and, somebody went, and it's been a while since anybody's really said anything truly insulting, but at the same time, I think it's the same thing. People have these knee-jerk reactions, and they say things, and they really don't think twice about it, because either they don't run into somebody who lives like me or looks like me, and or very often, and so they don't think twice about it, really, and a lot of them, I think, in some ways think that they're doing me a favor by, sort of giving me that sort of kick in the butt to grow up and become that person that I should become, and to sort of fall in line with the rest of everybody else. And I think it's really goes along well with that, because it's the same thing online. It's just this quick judgment from someone who sees this really small snippet of your life and doesn't know really anything about you in general. And even from just that tiny little interaction, they think that they have enough knowledge about you as a person to put a judgment on your entire existence. And it's that we really have to look out for as a society, to really try really hard to not make those knee-jerk judgments, because it's really damaging, and you never know how much you're really going to affect somebody, especially when you don't know what they're going through in their own life, what struggles they're going through, what their financial situation, what their mental situation is like. And so to sort of thinking that you're doing this person a favor by being mean. And again, a lot of people do. I've had people stop me to be like, what are you doing to your body? Why would you mark your body like that? And why would you? And it's like, I'm in a gas station and you don't know me. Like, what? This isn't even fans. This is well before YouTube, and it's like, people would stop me just to be like, you shouldn't do this because you're really going to regret this later. And it's like, you don't know anything about me. Like, you shouldn't be doing this. Maybe you're going to regret this later. When you think to yourself, how stupid was it that I stopped somebody in the middle of a gas station to give them life advice about something that just doesn't matter? And I think it's kind of funny that a lot of times at the end of the day, the judgments that they give you is really the judgments that they really should be giving themselves in the mirror for even thinking to do things like that. I remember just being out of high school, and I remember having a group of people follow me and my friends through a grocery store just to yell comments at us. And I thought to myself, like, 10, 15 years from now, you're the one that's going to feel like a complete fool and not me. Like, when you look back at yourself and realize that you're the one that stalked somebody through a grocery store to yell really uncreative, insults, you're probably going to be the one that looks back and feels stupid. And looking back, me just doing something because I enjoyed it, I'm probably not going to feel bad about that, And I always really thought about that. I don't know why I was so sort of forward-looking even when I was that young, but it's like I always had that in my mind. It's like, wow, at some point in your life when you actually have finally really grown up, in maturity level, you're going to look back at that moment in your life and realize what a complete and utter ass you were, and how you really treated people with such disrespect. And to me, that's the most surprising thing, is that people really don't look at themselves when they're judging people and don't realize, again, it's like, it doesn't make me look bad. It's only making you look bad, and especially with other people around. Like, even the other day when I was mentioning, I think in the first podcast, no, it was the second podcast, in the How to Talk to People podcast. And I was talking about an interaction I had with a lady at a gas station who doesn't know me really well, sees me maybe every few months or so, and sort of made this, she wasn't really trying to be super judgmental, but just sort of trying to be silly, but at the same time being serious, and asked me, what had happened to my hair. And it's just like, it faded. That's what happens to hair dye. But the thing I didn't mention was that there was another person there, another cashier, and she was covered in tattoos. And I think she also had purple hair. And the other thing that I noticed was this like wave of embarrassment that swept over her face when her counterpart made these comments, just, and the eye roll, just like sort of like silently apologizing for her, like, I'm so sorry that this person is saying these stupid things. Because it's like, you're literally judging somebody, and the person that you're working with literally looks the same way. And it's like, they knew immediately, and were truly embarrassed to be standing next to this person who was making these weird comments. And again, she wasn't even really being judgmental, and at least she wasn't trying to be super judgmental. And I don't really hold it. It's not like I would ever judge her or hold that against her, but at the same time, it was just inappropriate, and something that never should have been said. But it was just funny to me that the person next to her just immediately just had this look come over their face, like, I don't believe that I'm standing here right now and hearing this, And I think it goes to show with people like that it's like you really don't think about what's going on around you. You know, if you're making those type of judgments, it's like more than likely the people around you, when you say things like that, even the people who aren't living these alternative lifestyles or alternative culture, you know, there's still a lot of people who are smart enough to just not say anything or realize that it's not affecting them. Will realize that it's just not their choice. And so the people who are doing the judgment are, I would say, most of the time getting way more silent judgment from around them than the people that actually look different. And so I think it's kind of an interesting thought that, you know, at the end of the day, it's like you really, when you say stuff like this, you're not putting that person on the spot, especially as we grow as a society and have become more open to these different types of people and different ways to look, and tattoos and piercings and things like that. It's like most of the time nowadays, you're really going to be the one that looks bad when you say these things. And so it's like, why would you even put yourself in that place where you're going to look stupid to everybody else, you know, where you're going to look like the ignorant one and no one really cares about the guy with blue hair, you know? And I think that's, again, like I've said, really ties in well to some of these commenters on the 539 channel. It's like, you know, when you look at the comment section and you see all these positive comments, and then you decide to say, no one likes this, you should not do this. It's like you not only probably have not watched the entire video, but you literally commented without looking at any of the other comments to see if anybody else agrees with you. It's like there's these comments that people, you know, people go through the comment section, and I can tell when people are reading comments because I see the number of thumbs up, you know, that different comments get. I can see that in my creator studio, and I can see, you know, maybe 10 people saw that comment and they sort of upvoted that comment. And it's like, you truly must not be aware of anything going on around you if you're sending these comments out and not looking to make sure that people actually agree with you. So it's kind of silly to me. So hold on just a moment. All right, sorry about that. So yeah, if I can give a good wrap up on this, a moral to the story, it's just have as much information as you possibly can before you go out and decide to make a comment, make a judgment, talk about people, you know, and use interactions like this one here tonight as, you know, especially to those people who don't live a lifestyle like this, you know, that learn about people, talk to people, engage people, you know, instead of making the judgments, maybe just ask questions as a nice person, and we'll be happy to answer those questions and engage in discussions with you. We're regular people. We are normal. You know, style is different. Music tastes are different. Lifestyles are different. But at the end of the day, we're all, at least most of us, you know, are completely normal people, for whatever that means. And normal doesn't mean that you can't be different. And so instead of making judgments, you know, watch videos like this, ask questions again, and, you know, maybe try to make a friend that lives that lifestyle, and again, try and learn as much as you can before you go out there and say something that you're going to regret, and realize that at the end of the day, you're the one that ends up looking foolish for it. So, just treat everybody equally, treat everybody fairly, treat everybody nicely, and the world would be a lot better place. Because again, it's a boring world if we're all the same. If everybody dressed in khaki pants and a tucked in white collared shirt with a tie on, and that was all you saw, it would be boring. And no one wants that. And despite the fact that when we see these people out on the streets, we might be judgmental. Realize at the end of the day, there's probably a lot of people that you idolize out there, especially in music. Music's very popular. It's something that the vast majority of us engage in, and you're probably being judgmental of some of the of your favorite people in your life that you might not have a relationship with them. It's like, maybe go home and look up your favorite music star and realize that they might look the way the person you made fun of looks, the person that you judged looks. And maybe you should ask yourself, what does that mean for me? What does that mean to my outlook on this existence? And so I think that's where we can learn how to treat one another, is realizing, or sort of turning turning it around and looking in a mirror and sort of saying, how do I look saying this, So yeah, that's the real moral of the story. Look at yourself before you look at other people, and learn before you make judgments. And again, the world will be better for it, and the world will be a lot more interesting, because when judgment is gone, I think there's going to be a lot more people out there that realize that maybe they don't want to live such a normal lifestyle at the end of the day, and we're really at the end of the day just sort of looking for that confirmation that now it's okay for me not to look like everybody else. And it's 2019. Now's the time that you can realize that it's okay to not look like everybody else and not live like everybody else, and we can embrace that moment and move forward and create a better place for all of us. So that's my wrap up there, and that's what I think that everybody should take away from this is we do it because we love it, we do it because it's awesome, and we do it because this is the face of world culture, and some of the oldest culture on Earth itself. And so when you're insulting that, you're literally insulting all of our history. And I don't think anybody at the end of the day really wants to do that. So, and I think with that being said, I have said in the past, I kind of want to keep these podcasts more on track, even if it means that they're a little bit shorter. And so I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there instead of continuing to ramble on about all kinds of different subjects, although I will try and hop on here again really soon and do just a normal hangout stream and just chat and talk about whatever. But I do want to keep these streams fairly neat and orderly and on subject. So thank you everybody for joining me tonight. Appreciate you taking the moment to listen to me and my ideas and my outlooks on life, and talk about culture and about alternative culture, and about how we can all live together and be a little bit better to each other, and how we can elevate each other. So appreciate you all being here, and I will see everybody in the next live stream. Again, I don't know if we're going to be doing one tomorrow, but I will try to do one again in another few days or so. So yeah, I'll be looking for that, and I will try again to do more streams where I'm scheduling the streams so that you guys get a notification, hopefully a notification ahead of time. That way it's not this spontaneous pop-up that, hey, we're live. If you can catch it, you can catch it, sort of thing. So thank you, everybody. Good night, Faye. Good night, Savannah. Good night, Jade, Jenny, Laura. Am I missing anybody? Scrolling. Good night to Jake, if you're still here. Pam, if you're still here, good night. I don't know if Ian's here. Good night. And obviously to my friend Big Steve, a big shout out and good night to him if he is still here. And again, thanks for tuning in. Love you all. And I'll see you in the next one.